Dark Souls is reaching a level in which it's being constantly referred to whenever talking about difficult games, such as games like Crash Bandicoot, Hollow Knight, Dead Cells. It's kind of ridiculous, but it really shows the impact the Souls games have had on people. It's the Dark Souls of a genre. It's been reaching a level to the point where it's pretty much its own subgenre at this point, alongside Metroidvania, roguelike games. It really has changed video games for better or for worse, and many people are highly intimidated by the nature of the Souls games. They don't even attempt to try the game out. I felt like that originally, and I'm glad that I gave the game a chance because it really has impacted me. I personally believe that Dark Souls is a game that everybody should try. It really has impacted my perspective of games, and as someone who's been playing games their entire life, that doesn't happen all too often. Whenever someone thinks about impactful games, most people will instantly think of their childhood, which is understandable because we all love nostalgia. Games that we first played, maybe NES, SNES, classical games like that. Well, for me, The Wind Waker was definitely one of those games, if not the game. The adventure of that game was just so breathtaking at the time. Sailing across that huge ocean, not knowing where to go, finding new islands, and I just completely indulged myself 100% into that game. When before that, a lot of my gaming experience was done from another point of view, not playing the game. Watching my dad and my brother play games like Halo, Doom, games that I weren't allowed to play as a kid. Well, until I finally did. I imagine other people have very similar experiences with games. Of course, this will all vary, but there's surely an origin game that sparked your interest in the art form. Another example of impactful games may be something with an immersive story. Games like BioShock, how it just brought us into the world of Rapture and told us a completely amazing story. Or The Last of Us, how it explored the complex relationship of Joel and Ellie. These games tell a strong narrative that immerses the player on an emotional level. You start to feel for these characters and you get 100% invested in that world. For me, Dark Souls was something far more than either of those two examples. Before even playing the game, I've heard so much about it. I remember just listening to people talk about the sheer brutality of this game. You'll never pass the first boss. So crazy. Keep in mind, I played it after the second game was out, but before Bloodborne was released, right before the Skull of the First Sin came out. It wasn't as popular to the media yet at the time, but it was still constantly talked about. I think people were more intimidated back then. The difficulty was, of course, the main point, and still is, of Dark Souls. Well, to some people. I remember when I bought the game, and I thought I would never beat it. I thought I would pick it up once, and that was it. Something like that happened, of course. Got stuck 2 hours in, and what do I do now? But I did play it again, and I kept going, for a time at least. It's funny, the more I talk about Dark Souls with my friends, the more I see how different all of our experiences are. Every single one of my friends who have played the game found difficulty in different boss fights and different areas of the game. For example, Manus was very difficult for me. It took me probably a whole weekend to beat that boss. For another friend, it was fairly easy, beating it in a few tries. And it's crazy to think that the same boss can affect someone so differently. Of course, this is not exclusive for Dark Souls by any means, but I do feel like every boss fight of this game lends a different experience for everyone. Another example, Quelaag was very simple for me to finish, and took me maybe a try or two, which was surprising because, of course, that's one of the early bosses of the game. For another friend, it was much harder, and who knows what could have affected this. Maybe the build, maybe our playstyle was different. The first boss of the game can be a variety of bosses depending on where you start. For those unaware, I strongly suggest you check out Matthew Matos's video on Dark Souls. Might be long, but well worth the watch. I've learned a lot from that video, but I think one of the biggest takeaways that was making me realize different numbers of bosses that you can fight first in the game. Aside from the Asylum Demon, your first boss can either be the Taurus Demon, the Moonlight Butterfly, Sif, Gargoyles, the Stray Demon, Quelaag, the Cabra Demon, Pinwheel, and possibly another that I missed. It's crazy to think that you have so many options for your first boss alone. You can skip the Taurus Demon altogether. You can also skip the Cabra Demon. You can definitely skip the Moonlight Butterfly. You can go straight to Sif if you want. It's all up to you. Some people might refer this as sequence breaking, which is commonly referred in Metroidvanias like Super Metroid or Symphony of the Night. I would definitely agree calling it sequence breaking just because you make it possible to get different items and open different areas in an order that the developer probably did not intend. Of course, we cannot assume that it was the intended order, but it strongly suggests based on the game design. Some people even consider Dark Souls somewhat of a 3D Metroidvania, which I would also agree on, based on the level design and just the numbers of shortcuts and bringing you back to the hub world, very similar to a Metroidvania. You can choose what build you want to make. Aside from the usual knight, mage, etc., you can be a swordsman with healing spells if you want. You can be a fully armored pyromancer. It's really your choice, and experimentation is very possible and so amazing to go through the game using a different build every time. You can choose what to focus on in the game. You don't have to focus on the story whatsoever. In fact, many people believe there is no story in the game, which I don't blame them because it's not thrown in your face. The lore is of course out there. You can go read every item description, which will connect you to the world, every weapon description, and you can put the story together yourself. You could also completely ignore that. It's entirely up to you. Hell, you can even go through the whole game without reading one item description. It'll make things harder, like the Abyss Ring, but it's possible. The game sets a high standard on the freedom that it gives the player. It respects the player on a deep level, rather than just holding your hand through the first 2 hours like many games do these days. Things like Twilight Princess come to mind. It doesn't force you to do a long-winded tutorial. It tells you what you need to know in the tutorial, throws you in the world, which many people find as very intimidating, which of course I understand. It's very hard to jump into the game. Hell, many players probably won't even beat the game. They'll just give up, and many people might not even see half of the game. That's how easy it is to give up on this game. It's very easy to give up on this game, especially going in your first time. And I assume that many players will share this in common, and of course I've given up on the game at one point, as I know a lot of other people have. One thing that always fascinated me about this is the developers like Miyazaki and everyone behind FromSoft, they never changed the game to make it more accessible to players. Miyazaki has constantly stated it's not about the difficulty, but I mean, of course for some people it is. It's all about perspective. And it's just very amazing that they stuck with their roots, they stuck with their gut, and they made the game how they wanted it to be. Of course, no game is perfect, and Dark Souls gets a lot of criticism, especially for the second half of the game. After you beat Ornstein and Smough is when most people consider it to be the halfway point, which I agree. The common criticism I hear the most is about the level design. something I've not really talked about in this video, because it's not very much the point, but supposedly it takes a significant decrease in quality, which we're talking about the Duke Archives, Lost Izalith, New Londo, and the Demon's Ruins. Well, I agree to some extent that the level design isn't as great as the Undead Parish or Sans Fortress, and of course the DLC levels, and of course the Painted World, which is probably the best area in the game. I believe that the second half of the game is pretty good, and it adds new things entirely to each level. It takes on different approaches, and each area brings something new to the game. Whether that be a good thing or bad thing is ultimately up to you. The Duke Archives stressed more vertical gameplay that hasn't been seen besides in Blighttown. It also adds much more cinematic part to the game, with the scripted part of you getting thrown in prison and having to escape, and the monsters crying. More cinematic part of the game that isn't typically seen. The Demon's Ruins made a level completely in darkness, which forced you to obtain a light source one way or the other, or hell, going completely dark. Personally, I thought that was very cool, and Demon's Ruins is one of my favorite areas of the game, because every time I play this game, I always see myself finding a different light source, which might not seem like such an important part of the game, but it definitely shows the number of choice you have in this game. Hell, you don't have to get a light source, you can go in blind if you know where to go. It's gonna be very hard, but you can do it. New Londo made you curse yourself in order to attack the enemies, something you don't have to do in any other part of the game. Of course, you can get the item that doesn't technically curse you, but it's still a very cool design. And after that, you have to unflood the area, which opens up a whole new layer of New Londo. Lost Izalith, well, this one is very hard to defend. Yes, it brings the lava as a huge factor to the level, but it doesn't really capitalize on that or bring anything interesting. Especially since you get the flame ring, which kind of makes the lava pointless. And I feel like they definitely could have improved this area the most, and I feel like a lot of people also share that belief. So okay, so you might be saying, how did this all impact you? Well, after all, that is the title of the video. When I first played the game, I was honestly blown away by how difficult the game really was. I mean, I suppose previous to it, I never really challenged myself with video games. I mostly just played to enjoy them and experience them, which is what you're doing in Dark Souls, but to a different degree. I never really picked up games like Castlevania on Nintendo, but Dark Souls was really different. It challenged me in a way that it made me want to succeed. I mean, every time you die, a pop-up on the screen says right in your face that you died. I mean, what a way to throw it in your face. But of course, in Dark Souls, you will die over and over again. And about when I get to Sans Fortress, I found myself stuck, and I couldn't get past it. I kept trying to fight the serpents, and I kept failing, and I kept falling off, and I eventually gave up. I'm sure what I just said, it will probably be relatable to a lot of people who have played Dark Souls. A few other points where a lot of people will give up in the game are probably Blighttown, or maybe even Ornstein and Smough is a big one. But a lot of people genuinely just fall off this game because of the difficulty, and there's a lot of big spikes in it. But it kept bothering me that I would just give up on the game. So about 2 or 3 months later, I picked it up, and I kept failing, and I finally beat Sans Fortress, and I'll never forget that moment, because it was just such a moment of triumph for me that I've never really felt in another game before. Dying in this game isn't really the only challenge. The challenge of going through the entire journey to see the end. To not give up. There are many parallels to Dark Souls and real life. In life, we all have choices. Little ones like, what do I eat for breakfast? What am I going to wear? Or big ones, what do I want to pursue as a career? Is this the house where I want to live in? Is this the state where I want to live in? People experience everything differently. Maybe you hate tomatoes, but you like corn. Someone else might love corn, but someone else might never eat corn in their entire life. In life, you make mistakes. Nothing and no one is perfect. You cannot go back and fix the mistakes you've made. You can only keep moving forward. In life, you have challenges. And I believe that Dark Souls stimulates these factors. Of course, the game will never put you in the degree of stress that life will give you, which is obviously a good thing. But based on what I've said in this video, I believe that Dark Souls is about choices. It's about freedom. It's about overcoming obstacles. It's about making mistakes and learning from them. It's about experiencing and experimenting things differently from everyone else. So please, if you're listening and you haven't played the game, I urge you, try the game out for yourself. You may not feel the same way as I do, and that's okay. Because like life, and like Dark Souls, everyone has a different experience. And mine was impactful. Hey, thanks so much for watching. This is my first video, and I'm going to make a lot more. Maybe not all these types of gaming essays or gaming analysis videos, but I definitely will be making more of these. I'll also have other videos like reviews or critiques, and I'll also be throwing out some music videos because I am a musician. But thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, if you like what you've seen, please subscribe and like, and let me know what you think about the video. Let me know what I could do better, because this is my first time making a video, and of course it won't be perfect, and I want to make improvements. So thank you, and thank you for watching.